The 1970s were a decade of rebellion, where music became the voice of protest, passion, and taboo truths. Yet some songs hit nerves so deep that radio stations pulled the plug, politicians demanded silence, and entire communities fought to bury them. These were the songs that challenged morality, questioned authority, and broke cultural barriers, only to be banned, censored, or silenced. Today, we revisit 12 of the most controversial banned songs of the 1970s. Loretta Lynn with The Pill, 1975. When it comes to the most controversial songs of the 1970s, The Pill by Loretta Lynn stands out as a lightning rod. Already one of the most powerful women in country music, Lynn never shied away from tough subjects. But when she released The Pill in 1975, it shattered boundaries in ways the genre had never seen before. The song tackled the subject of birth control pills, a topic still taboo in conservative America. With her trademark honesty, Lynn sang about the freedom women gained when they were no longer tied down by endless pregnancies. The Pill was more than just a tune. It was a declaration of independence for women, giving voice to struggles that had been whispered in kitchens but silenced in public. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Dozens of country radio stations banned the track, claiming it was unsuitable for family listening and offensive to traditional values. In the conservative South, entire communities branded the song dangerous, and Loretta herself faced boycotts. But paradoxically, the controversy only fueled its popularity. The Pill climbed the charts, becoming one of the biggest hits of her career. For countless women across America, it was nothing short of an anthem of liberation. The song cracked open conversations about reproductive rights and gender equality at a time when silence was the norm. Today, The Pill is remembered as a landmark in country music history, a song that not only defied censorship, but helped change the cultural conversation. Loretta Lynn didn't just record a hit single. She gave women a voice and rewrote the role of country music in social change. Charlie Daniels Band with Uneasy Rider, 1973. In 1973, the Charlie Daniels Band released Uneasy Rider, a song that blended country storytelling with sharp satire. On the surface, it was a humorous narrative about a long-haired traveler who wanders into a redneck bar in the Deep South. But beneath the humor lay a biting critique of the cultural and political divides tearing America apart in the early 1970s. At the height of the Vietnam War and the counterculture movement, Uneasy Rider painted a vivid picture of the clash between hippies and conservatives. Daniels used exaggerated characters and witty lyrics to mock narrow-mindedness, racism, and blind patriotism. The song dared to highlight hypocrisy at a time when many Americans wanted music to provide comfort, not confrontation. The backlash came quickly. Several Southern radio stations banned the song, claiming it insulted their listeners and disrespected traditional American values. To them, Uneasy Rider was more than comedy. It was an attack on their way of life. Daniels, a Southern man himself, faced criticism for betraying his roots by siding with the counterculture in song. But while the band silenced Uneasy Rider in certain regions, it resonated deeply with younger audiences. The track became an underground anthem for those who felt alienated by rigid conservatism. Its humor made it palatable, but its message struck a nerve about America's widening cultural divide. Looking back, Uneasy Rider was more than just a novelty hit. It showcased how country musicians could step outside the genre's conservative mold and use wit to comment on politics and society. In a decade filled with division, Charlie Daniels took a bold risk and left behind a song that still echoes the culture wars of the 1970s. John Denver with Rocky Mountain High, 1972. Few songs captured the spirit of the American outdoors like Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. With its soaring melody and poetic lyrics, the song became an anthem for nature lovers and environmentalists of the 1970s. But what sounded pure and uplifting to many listeners was perceived as scandalous by others, so much so that the song was briefly banned on several U.S. radio stations. The controversy centered around one word: high. Critics and conservative broadcasters accused Denver of glorifying drug use, interpreting the lyric as a coded reference to marijuana. In an era when the war on drugs was intensifying, authorities were quick to target anything that might encourage youth rebellion. Denver, however, insisted the high referred to a spiritual and emotional state, the euphoria of being connected with nature in the Rocky Mountains. Despite Denver's explanations, several stations pulled the track from rotation, labeling it inappropriate. Ironically, the ban only made listeners more curious, and the song's popularity skyrocketed. Rocky Mountain High climbed the charts and became one of Denver's signature hits, helping cement his image as the gentle troubadour of the American landscape. Over time, the song gained recognition not just as a piece of music, but as a cultural symbol. In 2007, it was even adopted as one of Colorado's official state songs, a fitting tribute to its enduring impact. Looking back, the controversy feels almost absurd. What was once feared as a potential drug anthem is now celebrated as a heartfelt ode to the natural world. But in the heated climate of the 1970s, even a single word could transform a song into a battleground of values. Loretta Lynn with Rated X, 1972. If Loretta Lynn shocked the country world with The Pill, she had already paved the way for controversy 2 years earlier with Rated X. Released in 1972, the song tackled one of the most taboo subjects in country music at the time, the stigma faced by divorced women. In a conservative culture where divorce was whispered about but rarely acknowledged, Lynn sang with unapologetic candor. The lyrics spoke directly to the judgment and gossip aimed at women who dared to leave unhappy marriages. She highlighted how society branded them as easy or immoral, while divorced men often escaped without scrutiny. In doing so, Loretta gave voice to millions of women who felt silenced by double standards. The reaction was explosive. Many radio stations refused to play Rated X, claiming the subject matter was too risque and inappropriate for country audiences. Some critics accused Lynn of encouraging divorce, while others simply labeled the track too dirty for family-friendly airwaves. Yet, just like with The Pill, the attempt to bury the song only amplified its power. Despite the bans, Rated X soared to the top of the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart, becoming Loretta's 6th #1 hit. Its success proved that country fans, especially women, were hungry for songs that reflected their real lives and struggles. For many, it was the first time they heard their own experiences validated in mainstream country music. Looking back, Rated X is more than just a banned song. It's a milestone in country's evolution. Loretta Lynn dared to say what others would not, breaking cultural silence around divorce and challenging the moral codes of her time. By doing so, she not only shaped the sound of the 1970s, but also expanded the boundaries of what country music could talk about. Jeannie C. Riley with Harper Valley PTA, 1968, resurging in the 1970s. Though originally released in 1968, Harper Valley PTA by Jeannie C. Riley continued to stir waves of controversy well into the 1970s. The song told the story of a small-town mother who storms into a parent-teacher association meeting to call out the hypocrisy of its members. With razor-sharp lyrics, Riley exposed the double standards of so-called moral guardians who judged her while hiding their own scandals. For many conservative communities, the message hit too close to home. The idea of a woman openly confronting authority figures, especially in a witty, fearless way, was seen as downright rebellious. Several radio stations banned or restricted the track, claiming it was disrespectful and undermined traditional family values. In some towns, it even sparked protests, with local PTA groups condemning the song as an attack on their institutions. But the backlash couldn't stop the momentum. Harper Valley PTA rocketed to the top of both the country and pop charts, making Jeannie C. Riley the first woman to top Billboard's Hot 100 and Hot Country Singles simultaneously. The song became a cultural phenomenon, later inspiring a film and a TV series, further cementing its place in American pop culture. By the time the 1970s rolled around, the song was still a lightning rod in conservative circles. Yet for listeners across the country, it became an anthem of empowerment, celebrating the courage to stand up against hypocrisy. Looking back, Harper Valley PTA remains a bold reminder of how country music could blend humor, storytelling, and social commentary, while rattling the cages of authority. In a decade defined by rebellion and questioning tradition, Riley's hit fit right in, even if it was too controversial for some to handle. Elton John with Benny and the Jets, 1974. At first listen, Benny and the Jets sounded like a quirky glam rock anthem, filled with Elton John's trademark piano flair and a chorus that stuck in your head. But beneath its eccentric style, the song sparked controversy that led to bans and restrictions on several American radio stations in the mid-1970s. The issue wasn't explicit lyrics or political statements. It was the lifestyle the song seemed to glamorize. With its flamboyant characters and surreal imagery, Benny and the Jets was seen by some conservative broadcasters as promoting decadence, drug culture, and non-traditional sexuality. In an era when glam rock and gender-bending performances were shocking to mainstream America, Elton John's larger-than-life persona only intensified the unease. Some Southern radio programmers refused to spin the track, dismissing it as immoral and out of step with wholesome family entertainment. Others criticized its satirical edge, interpreting the lyrics as mocking consumerism and pop culture in a way that felt subversive. For Elton John, who was just beginning to dominate the U.S. charts, the pushback was both a challenge and a badge of honor. Despite the bans, the song became a monster hit. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1974 and remains one of Elton's most iconic tracks. The controversy only added to his mystique, proving that audiences were more fascinated than repelled by his bold style. Over time, Benny and the Jets came to symbolize not just Elton John's rise, but also a cultural shift where challenging norms and celebrating individuality began to break into the mainstream. Today, it's hard to imagine that Benny and the Jets was once viewed as too risky for the airwaves. But in the climate of the 1970s, it was exactly the kind of song that blurred the lines between rebellion and pop genius. Loretta Lynn with Wings Upon Your Horns, 1970. Loretta Lynn never shied away from controversy, and with Wings Upon Your Horns, she once again pushed the boundaries of what country music could say. Released in 1970, the song cloaked a daring subject in poetic language, but the meaning was clear to anyone listening. Lynn used religious imagery to describe a young woman's loss of innocence, singing about how you've given me wings upon my horns, in a metaphor that tied sexuality to sin and redemption. For conservative audiences, the symbolism was far too direct. Many Southern radio stations were quick to ban or heavily restrict the song, claiming it was inappropriate and offensive to religious values. To them, the blending of sacred references with sexual awakening was crossing a line that country music had never dared approach. Critics accused Lynn of undermining morality, while others condemned her for simply addressing a reality that countless women experienced. Yet, as with many of her controversial songs, Loretta tapped into an unspoken truth. Listeners who had been silenced by shame and judgment finally heard a reflection of their own struggles in her lyrics. While Wings Upon Your Horns didn't achieve the same commercial success as her later hits like The Pill, it became a cult favorite, especially among women who recognized the courage it took to sing such words in 1970. The backlash also underscored Loretta Lynn's unique role in country music. She wasn't just a star, she was a truth-teller who dared to sing about the subjects Nashville preferred to ignore: divorce, birth control, female sexuality. Each ban, each scandal, only solidified her reputation as a fearless voice for women in a genre dominated by men and tradition. Today, Wings Upon Your Horns is remembered less for its chart position and more for its audacity. It remains a striking example of how Loretta Lynn turned taboo into timeless art, showing once again that controversy and courage often walk hand in hand. The Rolling Stones with Brown Sugar, 1971. When the Rolling Stones released Brown Sugar in 1971, it instantly became one of their most recognizable hits, but also one of their most controversial. Driven by Keith Richards' iconic guitar riff and Mick Jagger's swaggering vocals, the song raced up the charts, landing at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Yet beneath its infectious rhythm lay lyrics that sparked outrage, bans, and decades of debate. The song referenced slavery, interracial sex, and drug use in ways that critics found deeply offensive. Lines alluding to slave ships and sexual exploitation made many broadcasters recoil. As a result, radio stations across the U.S. and abroad banned or heavily censored the track, declaring it inappropriate for public airplay. Some listeners argued the lyrics glorified exploitation, while others saw it as a biting, if uncomfortable, social commentary. For the Rolling Stones, the controversy wasn't new. They had already built a reputation as provocateurs who thrived on pushing boundaries. But Brown Sugar struck nerves that went beyond rock and roll rebellion. In the racially and politically charged climate of the early 1970s, the song was viewed as both shocking and dangerous. Yet, as so often happens with band music, the outrage only fueled its popularity. Fans bought the single in droves, and the song became a staple of the Stones' live shows. Over the years, however, the band themselves acknowledged its troubling content. Mick Jagger has admitted feeling uncomfortable performing it in later decades, and in recent tours, the Stones have even pulled it from their set lists. Today, Brown Sugar remains one of the most debated songs in rock history, a track that combined irresistible music with lyrics that exposed and exploited society's darkest contradictions. It was proof that in the 1970s, controversy wasn't just a byproduct of rock, it was often the fuel that kept it burning. Sex Pistols with God Save the Queen, 1977. Few songs embodied the rebellious chaos of the late 1970s, like the Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen. Released in 1977 during Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee, the track was less a celebration and more an explosion of anger against the British establishment. With snarling vocals and raw punk energy, Johnny Rotten declared the monarchy a fascist regime, a line that sent shockwaves across the United Kingdom and beyond. The backlash was immediate and severe. The BBC and virtually every major British radio station banned the song outright. Record stores refused to stock it, and posters advertising the single were defaced or torn down. The government, fearing public unrest, treated the song as a direct attack on national pride during a time of celebration. Yet despite, or perhaps because of this suppression, the single still surged to number 2 on the UK charts, with many fans believing it was deliberately kept from reaching number 1. For the punk movement, the band turned God Save the Queen into an anthem. The very attempt to silence it amplified its power, making it a rallying cry for disaffected youth who felt ignored by politicians, crushed by unemployment, and alienated from the system. The song's existence was proof that punk wasn't just about noise, it was about defiance. Looking back, God Save the Queen is remembered as one of the most controversial and censored songs in history. Its legacy goes beyond punk rock. It stands as a reminder of how music can challenge authority and ignite cultural revolutions. In the cautious, often conservative world of 1970s broadcasting, it wasn't just offensive, it was terrifying. And that's exactly what made it unforgettable. Donna Summer with Love to Love You Baby, 1975. In 1975, disco was exploding onto the scene, and no song embodied its sensual power more than Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby. Produced by Giorgio Moroder, the track stretched over 16 minutes in its full version, filled with moans, sighs, and an unmistakably erotic performance. It wasn't just a song, it was an experience that pushed sexual expression in pop music to a level many had never heard before. The controversy was immediate. Radio stations across the United States and Europe banned the track, calling it obscene and pornographic. Conservative commentators claimed it blurred the line between music and softcore audio. In some countries, government censors outright prohibited it from being played in public. Even within the disco-loving community, the song was whispered about with a mix of fascination and shock, but scandal-fueled success. The single version rocketed into the Billboard Top 10, and the album helped establish Donna Summer as the Queen of Disco. Nightclubs embraced it as a liberation anthem, celebrating sexuality in a way that felt revolutionary during the mid-1970s. For women in particular, Summer's unapologetic sensuality resonated as both empowering and subversive. Critics, however, continued to debate its artistic value. Was it art, exploitation, or both? That debate only reinforced the track's notoriety. By daring to make pleasure audible, Summer and Moroder transformed not just disco, but the entire conversation about sexuality in popular music. Today, Love to Love You Baby is remembered as a landmark of disco, proof that a band song could still redefine an era. What frightened radio executives in 1975 is now celebrated as a bold expression of freedom and one of the most iconic tracks in dance music history. George Jones with Love Bug, 1974. George Jones, often called the Possum, was already a towering figure in country music when he released Love Bug. On the surface, it seemed like a lighthearted honky-tonk tune, catchy, upbeat, and brimming with Jones's signature twang. But in the moral climate of the 1970s, even a playful song could spark suspicion. The controversy emerged from the title itself. Many radio programmers and conservative critics interpreted Love Bug as a coded reference to drug use, specifically LSD or marijuana, which were often described in bug or trip slang. At the height of the war on drugs, stations across the South and Midwest grew wary of playing anything that could be construed as promoting narcotics. As a result, several broadcasters temporarily pulled Love Bug from the airwaves. For George Jones, the idea was almost laughable. He had intended nothing more than a fun, feel-good country hit. Still, the band highlighted how paranoia over cultural change made even innocent lyrics targets of censorship. At the time, America's youth culture was associated with rebellion, and anything remotely suggestive of drugs was immediately suspect. Ironically, the controversy gave the song extra attention. Love Bug climbed into the Billboard Hot Country Singles Top 10, proving that fans were either unconcerned or amused by the accusations. For Jones, who battled personal demons with alcohol and substance abuse throughout his career, the irony was bitterly poetic. A song wrongly tied to drugs became a minor scandal, while his real struggles were far more serious. Today, Love Bug is remembered not for its ban, but for its rollicking charm. It's a reminder of how hypersensitivity to cultural shifts in the 1970s could transform even the most cheerful country tune into a supposed threat. George Jones's classic stands as proof that in that era, controversy often said more about society's fears than about the songs themselves. The Doors with Light My Fire, recensored in the 1970s. Although Light My Fire was originally released in 1967, its controversy carried well into the 1970s, when the cultural battles over drugs and morality grew even fiercer. The song's hypnotic organ riff and Jim Morrison's seductive vocals had already made it a rock classic. But its lyrics, especially the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," kept it under fire from censors. By the early 1970s, as radio tightened its standards during the escalation of the war on drugs, the song was once again pulled from airplay in several markets. Broadcasters argued that it glorified getting high, and the ban gained momentum when Morrison's infamous refusal to censor the lyric during a live performance on The Ed Sullivan Show resurfaced in public memory. That defiance had turned into legend, and by the 70s, it fueled renewed censorship of the track. Despite these restrictions, Light My Fire only grew in stature. It became an anthem of countercultural freedom, embraced by a new generation who saw the bands as proof of the establishment's fear of youth culture. The song's extended instrumental break and sensual imagery resonated with listeners who were disillusioned with authority and eager for liberation, whether musical, sexual, or spiritual. In hindsight, the bands did little more than immortalize the track. Light My Fire has since been enshrined as one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded, landing on countless best-of lists and inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. What once terrified radio executives now defines the very essence of 1960s and 1970s rebellion. Ultimately, its recensorship in the 70s proved just how long the echoes of the counterculture would haunt mainstream America. The Doors' classic wasn't just a hit. It was a symbol of how music could ignite controversy across decades.